That we're now going to have a very in-depth session with quite a number of speakers on the topic of herbs grown in the USA. And while we didn't have a specific sponsor for this session, NatureX as the title sponsor is acknowledged for sponsoring this particular session that is to discuss this incredibly interesting movement of a continued call for locally produced goods, including botanicals. So I'm going to turn it over to my friend Edward Fletcher, who will moderate this panel.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael, and APA for continuing to put on a fabulous Botanical Congress, and I love the name of it. So we're going to live up to that Botanical Congress in this panel. So those of you who know me or those of you who don't, I've made my living all of my life in plants. I started out in the ornamental business, propagating and growing plants for the landscaping and mail order retail flower business, transferred into the medicinal business in the mid-90s. So it's been a fun life so far, and I hope to continue it. So I feel really at home with these folks because they also have dirt under their fingernails like I do. So we're gonna talk a little bit about, like it says, the topic is grown in the USA. You see some of the questions there in your program that we're going to have. And also as we go through this, we're going to have each presenter or group of presenters give their short presentation, 15 to 20 minutes. And then if you'll jot down your questions, I think we'll have all the question and answers at the end. There's a few questions in here that we're going to try to address in each and every one of the presentations, and then we'll go from there. So write down any and all of your questions that you have. So the cool thing about this is botanical dietary supplements begin as a seed or root in the dirt. So that's what we're starting. This is everywhere. There's dirt everywhere, but today we're talking about the dirt in the USA. What could be grown in the USA? In the last few years, my company, Herbal Ingenuity, has had several customers come to us and say, hey, we used to get this from China, other countries, other areas, but we would like to bring it back closer to our home, closer for, footprints for whatever reason, but they're asking us, can you do it in the USA? So there's been a big trend, even though you hear a lot of the cost issues from other countries, I'm seeing more of a trend of bringing things back in the USA in a lot of instances. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So if you want to look at their bios and some of the introductions in the program, and I'm going to highlight a few. We're going to start off with Jeff and Melanie Carpenter. And I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to review their book, The Organic Medicinal Herb Farmer, and gave a review in the Herbalgram. And I should have brought it, so I got an autograph. But anyway, it's a very good book, and it's one that I have in reaching distance in my office on my shelf because it tells you practically everything you need to know besides just go out there and do it if you want to be an organic farmer. So Jeff, he obviously co-authored the book with Melanie, and they both work at the farm, organic farm. I'll start out with Melanie. She grew up at Sage Mountain, and for those of you who don't know, her stepmother is Rosemary Gladstar. How many in the room know Rosemary? Oh yeah, see there? We're in good company, so you're with family here today. So anyway, so she's listed as a farmer, a mother, a community herbalist, an educator, and a previous principal even. Okay, so she's used to teaching kids, teaching us. So anyway, and they're director of the International Herb Symposium and is it the New England Women's Herb Conference? Okay, that's great. And Jeff, they're going to co-present here together. So Jeff's got blood, farming in his blood just like I do. He's been in it all his life. Also, you started out with an apprenticeship with Rosemary. I assume that's how you guys met. Okay, that's what I figured. So anyway, you've done authorization. Obviously, you do cultivation. You're the president of the Vermont Herb Growers Cooperative, which is a unique organization. I think that's when we first met. So I'm going to let them give their presentation, and then we'll do the rest of the speakers.
Thank you, Ed. So thank you so much for having us today. Jeff and I, we're teasing. Our family says it usually takes an act of Congress to get us off the farm anytime between spring and when snow hits Vermont. And so it's really fitting that a Botanical Congress would get us to Las Vegas in August. So thank you for having us. And we really feel that it's a timely question that's being asked today for this amazing panel of people coming from lots of different walks of life in the herbal industry. about herb sourcing from the United States. And Jeff and I left our farm yesterday afternoon and flew overnight to be here so that we could present the model that we're doing in Vermont, because we are really passionate about it, and we feel that there is an important place at the table for small farmers from America, from the United States, small family farms to mid-sized farms that could really help bring a level of localized medicine, organic plants, and amazing medicinals to the industry. And there are a lot of people doing amazing things, not only in the field, but also in the forests. And so we're really pleased to be here. This is the cleanest I've been in months. So it's nice to be here. Thank you. And so we're going to talk. Oh, thank you. We're going to talk about this today. Jeff and I come from Vermont, and we have a very small farm compared to some of the big agribusiness. We have a 10-acre farm, and we've been very successful at that for our family. And what we want to present to you today is our model of the small to mid-sized farm. We banded together 3 years ago to create a cooperative of farms in Vermont that are all organic farms. They're all under 50 acres. They're all doing different size and amounts of herbs. And we've banded together to try to break into the wholesale markets to provide another model. Our goal and our hope is that there will be an herb grower in every county, in every state, in every bioregion, and that we will partner with our friends in industry, that we will find ways to have this renaissance and this rejuvenation of the small family farm. So that's our scope. That's what we're representing. And look forward to talking about it with you. So the genesis, just kind of went over this, just to give a little scale. Jeff and I have a 10-acre farm. It's the two of us and our 11-year-old daughter, who's not very helpful right now. So we have 3 full seasonal employees and 1 part-time employee that works year-round in the office. And we produce 2 to 3 tons of medicinal herbs a year, dried medicinal herbs. And if you know the ratio, that's a lot of plant matter for 2 people to put through a small farm. And we found when we were farming that we could not keep up with the demand. One of the questions in the program is, will consumers support higher price point and cost? Will they support herbs coming from the United States? And we have had an affirmative, a yes. They want these high-quality, artisanal, hand-grown, processed herbs. They love the narrative, they love the medicine, and they're willing to pay for it, and we sell out every year. And so we came to a crossroads a couple years ago where we were like, do we keep turning away business, retail and wholesale? Do we get bigger and try to buy more farmland in Vermont? Do we increase our economy of scale? This has been a very big question. And Jeff and I like our value doing things by hand and being in the field and being with the plants. So we decided that we were going to explore a new model for us. We were going to see if the farmers in Vermont would want to band with us. We have a lot of Vermont vegetable farmers. The vegetable pie can only be cut so small. There's only room for so many. So we said, well, let's throw in a new pie. Let's throw in medicinal herbs. Not marijuana, that's the other conversation, but the other medicinal herbs. And let's see what we can do. And so we went for it. We wrote a book, The Organic Medicinal Herb Farmer. We wanted to share our information. We said, let's just give everything out there and see if anyone wants to join us. And so it was our techniques, the things that 2 people did with a pretty small shoestring budget. And we had lots, like hundreds of emails saying, I either want to start a farm or I want to diversify my pre-existing farm. And so with that excitement and that seed and all these Vermont farmers clamoring, we were awarded a U.S.A. specialty crop block grant, and we did a feasibility study. That was in 2015, and we said, let's see what the markets might bear, who the buyers might be, and what the farmers need to be ready. So then in 2015, based on our study, it looked really good. And so, but like good farmers, we wanted to see if it grew corn. We're just one thing on paper, another thing on the ground. And so we piloted it with 3 other farmers, some that were pre-existing farms, and one that was brand new to farming, just trying to get a gauge there, but what that would be like. And we learned a lot that first year, and we realized we needed to create a readiness survey. And from that readiness survey, we went out to literally 150 farmers that were emailing us and said, if you would take the survey, please, we'd like you to consider joining us. You had to be organic. You had to be a pre-existing farmer. You needed to have some levels of mechanization. And so we outlined that, and then in 2016, we selected 8 farms from our area, and we formed the Vermont Herb Growers Cooperative. I know that's kind of small to read, but we'll put it up on the website or whatever if you want to look at it. But just the different things that it takes to create an organization like a co-op, creating things like SOPs, a bidding process, how do we work with our buyers, what kinds of manufacturing guidelines do they have. Farmers on the ground didn't know this, and it was a big learning curve. So that was one of the things that the co-op tried to provide for these farmers. We had 6 farmers, some that were just getting started that did only a half an acre, some that were doing 6 to 8, and some that are now poised to go on to 10 to 15. So I'm just giving you that scale. We worked with 9 companies that did bids with us that believed that we could try to do this. They were really gracious, helping us with our learning curve, and also really working with us on the quality standards and identification. And so thanks to those companies, we have been working with them for the last 2 years, and we have surplus, so we also grow things and sell things on spec. And we've been working with the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia to try to quantify what is different about American herbs. What can we show for quality? How can we help with botanical identification and levels of constituents and organic standards? And so we're working with them right now to collect samples from the farm. It's a really great partnership, and we're seeing success. We have more farms coming online, and we think that this could be a model. Different bioregions, farms pulling together. Maybe they're bigger than 10 acres, but still to collaborate and to work together in this way. The tractor, but this is...
Yeah. Thanks, Melanie. So what are the benefits of forming the co-op? There's been some really incredible work that we've done. Pardon? Oh, sorry. The co-op actually serves as a marketing and sales organization. So fortunately, we're able to avoid a lot of the regulations, such as FSMA and a lot of the FDA regulation. We're not a warehouse. We're not storing herbs. The co-op is mainly a marketing and sales organization. So working together to meet larger wholesale demand. As Melanie mentioned, our farm, we were finding that we were turning away business. We were turning away orders larger than we were comfortable meeting, and that's not a good way to do business. So by pooling our resources with other farms, we're able to tap into the larger wholesale markets and sell bigger quantities. For example, this year we're growing 1,000 pounds or so of ashwagandha and tulsi. We don't want to grow a whole acre or 2 acres of these crops on our farms, given we only have 10 acres in scale. So by sharing this with other farms and then combining lots, we're able to provide these bigger quantities for our buyers. Shared equipment. One of the most important things that we're sharing is knowledge, which is not on the slide, but knowledge. So we're learning a lot. As Melanie mentioned, these are primarily veggie farmers. We're learning a lot from them because they have veggie farming requires a really highly efficient model in order to compete. So we're learning a lot from them as far as mechanization and equipment, and they're learning a lot from us. A lot of them are breaking into this new industry. We're sharing equipment. We're also sharing bulk purchasing power for our packaging materials and for our fertilizers and other soil inputs and supplies. Crop redundancy is a good thing because there are always crop failures. You know, as Melanie mentioned, we're growing 40 or so different species, and every year we have challenges in the field. And by spreading the wealth out, spreading crops out among different farms and different bioregions with different soils, we have better insurance against crop losses. We're all growing overages on our specific bids. So say we bid 700 pounds of ashwagandha, we're actually trying to grow 1,000 or so. And with the surplus material that we are producing, we are able to market that through our own farm and through other farms. So we're also working farmer to farmer doing sales and marketing on our own as well as through the co-op. Some of the challenges that we've faced. Paradigm change. Again, vegetable farmers, they're primarily growing annual crops. Crops have to be planted every year. They have a lot of pest and disease issues. They're growing crops that have been hybridized and are very susceptible to lots of different challenges, whereas we're growing perennials, a lot more suitable to permaculture models, a lot more resistant to pests and diseases. These plants are wild by nature. This paradigm change has been hard for some of the growers, but they're actually looking for more resilient models in their annual farming with lots of, pests and disease, and in some cases even some chemicals. They are, used to immediate perishability with a lot of their crops, so they're definitely looking for benefits with having the storage. When we dehydrate most of the botanicals that we're working with, it gives us a lot greater storage, and that's beneficial to them, not having that perishability, having to get their products to market as fast. Capitalization has been one of the challenges that they have faced. It definitely requires a different level of equipment, especially with the drying technology, and so we're asking these new farmers to dehydrate their own botanicals. This is something that we can't really do in a shared facility due to the distance traveled between farm to farm. So they're having to invest in some equipment, primarily the drying technology. Minimum of $10,000 up to $20,000 or $30,000 to get scaled up for dehydration. Lots of challenges with the drying techniques as well. As we all know here, quality is of the utmost importance with dealing with these botanicals, and if they're not dried properly or if they're dried too thoroughly, we either lose chemical constituents or we can set up for microbiological contamination. So drying has been a challenge, but again, with our experience, with Melanie's and my experience in the field, we're able to provide technical support and bring our growers up to speed with drying, and so far we've had really great results. Everyone is sort of on the same page. We worked with an engineer from the University of Vermont to help us develop some kind of standardized drying methods and drying technologies, and we're having good results with that challenge. Marketing to a changing industry. So primarily what Melanie and I have been, our clients through our farm have been small to mid-scale herbal product manufacturers, and for years they have been primarily doing their own manufacturing. Well, now with increased FDA scrutiny and economies of scale, we're seeing a lot of them starting to work more with contract manufacturers. And so what we're seeing is instead of our small to mid-scale buyers sourcing their herbs directly from us, they're now going to the contract manufacturers who prefer to source their own materials. Oftentimes they're sourcing materials that's not as of high quality that the individual companies are used to dealing with, and they also want to sell the botanicals that they source to the companies that they're manufacturing for. So we're trying to break into that. We're trying to market directly to the contract manufacturers. That's been challenging, but we're making some headway. We're also having some good results with our small to mid-scale buyers, convincing the contract manufacturers that buying these high-quality, artisanal grade, pharmacopeal grade herbs from small farms in the U.S. is a good choice for them. And we're starting to see some paradigm shift there. Navigating testing and lot tracking. So microbiological testing is something that these farmers are not used to having to deal with. So we're having to really make sure that everyone's on the same page with cleanliness, hygienic standards, and we're working with some labs to test our herbs. We're sending them off to our buyers we're testing them beforehand. This is challenging though when you're talking about 500 or 1,000 or a couple thousand pounds of material. We're taking a 5-ounce sample of that material and we're sending it off to a lab to be analyzed for, usually it's microbiological, heavy metal testing. Sometimes it can even be bioactive assays. To find a representative sample in 5 ounces from 1,000 or a 2,000 pound lot is challenging. So we're working with some scientific methodology, and that's another challenge that we're working with, but that we're overcoming. Price points and economy of scale. So primarily our pricing is driven by our cost of production. We are paying attention to the industry as a whole in the pricing, but we definitely can't undersell ourselves. We can't underprice our herbs. So on small farms, economy of scale plays into it. We're doing a lot less mechanization. Even though we are mechanized, we're doing a lot more hands-on in order to achieve that higher quality. So our price points are a little bit higher, but what we are finding is that the consumer is willing to pay a higher price. The herbal product manufacturers are listening to their customers. Their consumers are demanding higher quality. They want to have a relationship with the farmer, and that is really helping us out a lot. So the answer to the question, is the herbal product consumer willing to pay more for high quality, locally grown herbs? The answer, in our opinion, is yes, absolutely. And we feel that this is a great model for agriculture in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff and Melanie, very much. And I applaud your success with your farm. Hope it continues. Very much so. Excuse me. So the next presenter is Holly. I'm just going to use first names. Is that okay? We'll just stick with Holly Chittum. You can read her bio in here, but the first thing it says is she's a doctoral candidate at Virginia Tech, but I've never seen her in the university setting. I always see her out in the woods, or about 2 weeks ago she brought a group through to our facility in North Carolina and toured them around, but she's always working on non-timber forest products. And for those of you who don't know that term so well, most of the time when people go into the forest, and most of the high value items are the timber, and the people are looking up. We're talking about non-timber forest products, because even though we do have some barks in our industry and some of the leaves, some big trees, most of ours are perennials or annuals, or again, they grow in the ground. They're not the large trees, so they're considered non-timber forest products. But Holly's done a lot of things in her lifetime. Right now she's understanding the supply chain dynamics with different consumer groups. She's working really, if you all want to dig deep down in your bag and learn a little bit more, there's a brochure or a little leaflet in there. It's the Appalachian Beginning Forest Farmers Coalition. So Jeff and Melanie work out on the farm and cultivation outside. Most of yours is out in the open in fields. Holly works with growers that I'm on the advisory board of, and we try to help beginning forest farmers who want to grow something to understand the value of growing some of these crops that grow in the forest naturally. Don't take a golden seal or a ginseng that grows in the woods and go out and put it in the field and put artificial shade. If you can do it, you have forest and land. In the Appalachian region of the country on the eastern U.S., we have a lot of forest and a lot of land. So she's worked with some governmental organizations, universities, and to get this going. So she's helping these big forest farmers get started in the forest. So Holly, you want to give us a preview?
Bring my timer with me, because I've been told that I have the most amount of slides. And I'm gonna try not to take too long on this. Thanks for the introduction. I want to also just really quickly introduce John Munsell, who's not here today. He's the project director, and he and I have been working on this since the beginning, since we wrote the grant for it. I guess I'll start by just talking about some things that everyone in this room already knows. I've been here today listening to what we've been talking about, which is basically that herbal products, sales are on the rise, and they're going to continue to rise, and that rising demand can create some challenges in the supply chain. And some of the ones that I think that forest farming really speaks to are these ones: sustainability of supply, traceability, and ensuring quality. I want to talk specifically about forest botanicals today, but definitely talking about forest botanicals that are grown in the United States in a certain way. If anybody's not familiar with these forest botanicals, there are really over 50 species that grow native to the Appalachian region that are currently in commerce, but some of them more so than others. And these are some of the high flyers. The ones on the left I think we'll be talking about most today, just with a couple of little case studies. So I guess I love this slide. I actually took it from Eric Burkhart, who's another project partner with us, that I think is really, really explanatory for what we do with forest farming. When we're talking about wild harvest, ginseng is not equal to a lot of other sort of weedy or herbaceous plants that grow out in the sunshine. They're not like a dandelion here. So there's some different considerations in terms of what it takes to get them from the seed to the shelf. And we're talking about these sort of slow-growing perennials. They grow underneath a forest canopy, and they take sometimes 3, maybe 5, even up to 9 years to reach a harvestable age. So it's just a little bit different when we're talking about those. One really good example I like to bring up when we're talking about sustainability is American ginseng. It's pretty singular plant in terms of its trade history. It's been, I think, our oldest export to China that's been a continual export, about 300 years of trade history, and mainly wild harvested is what's been exported. And it's caused some concerns in terms of sustainability, and our wild populations have kind of dwindled. It's on it's CITES Appendix 2 listed, so there's some restrictions on international trade with this plant. But I like to talk about it because to some extent, even though it's kind of an enigma in itself, it really set the stage for some relatively nonlinear supply practices that are similar to other wild harvested forest botanicals as well, and have continued into the present. So I don't know if it's really a very good representation, but I have this little diagram over here that kind of shows, you've got a lot of pickers, a lot of people that are out wild harvesting from lots of different places, and they maybe will bring their harvest into a county dealer, local dealer, something like that, and that dealer will sell up the supply chain to a consolidator, an aggregator, something like that, or maybe they skip that step and go right to the aggregator, and maybe they sell to a bulk distributor, something like that. But the traceability is difficult in a situation like that. If you've got a problem, how do you trace it back to the beginning? And when you talk about traceability, then you start to talk a little bit about, quality control and how you control for quality in a situation like that. So another good example of that, I think, with forest botanicals is black cohosh. Black cohosh has had some pretty serious issues that are highly publicized with adulteration. I think a lot of that can really have to do, to some extent, to the prices that industry is willing to pay for the plant, but it also has something to do with, wild harvest and, what we've got out in the wild right now. Main issues here, I think, are we import sometimes black cohosh. Actia racemosa is native to the Appalachian region of the United States and nowhere else in the world, but we do import some of this, and so we have adulteration associated with that import. But we also have adulteration associated with species misidentification out in the wild here in Appalachia as well. There are several Actia species that are native to the Appalachian region, and they look so similar, it's really hard to tell them apart. Sometimes you can't. And, we're talking about wild harvesters. They're not botanists necessarily. They're not herbalists, so it can be a problem there too. So those are kind of the three issues that we have with the current model, or the one that's really persisted over the longest period of time of wild harvest. And so what do we do about it? I guess the obvious answer to that would be cultivation, right? And people have definitely, as Ed mentioned, they've cultivated these plants in the field, which has its high points. Definitely, you can pack a lot more plants in. You have more space for tilling the soil and things like that. Harvest is a lot easier with that. But with these plants, it's not their native environment. So there are some issues that you find that you have with them. Disease control is a problem, especially with ginseng. You find that you have to use a lot of inputs, like 4 or 5 different fungicides just to keep the fungal growth down enough for them to get to harvest. And so that can be a real problem. So on the other hand, some plants grow really well in cultivation. But again, when you're thinking about cultivation, you're thinking about these plants who they live in the forest environment. There's another way to do it, and that way to do it is the way that our coalition focuses on. That's forest farming, which is just what the name implies. It's farming under a forest canopy. It can happen in a lot of different ways. It's not just one way of doing it, and we can talk about a few of those different ways. But it's a really important way as far as the way that we understand it, because it speaks to all of these problems that we have in the supply chain, but it also allows plants to grow within their native environment, one that's evolutionarily familiar to them, and they're around their companion species of plants, associated mycorrhizal fungi, that sort of thing. And there's even, from an energetic standpoint, that sounds good, right? And even some research right now is kind of showing that those communal ways of developing is better for plants in terms of their development, in terms of constituency and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of good reasons for it. And I think the reason that, really is most important to me, maybe, it's different for everyone in this room, is also for the farmers. This provides an opportunity for people who live in Appalachia, who really historically are pretty economically underserved, to have an income source. And an income source that's not coal mining or something like that, or surface mining, an income source that really also sustains an ecosystem. One other way that folks will, in Appalachia will, get their income from the land would be from timbering, and excessive timbering is a problem in Appalachia. So this is one way to do it that is really good for everybody. And it's also really good for the consumer too, from my perspective, because it offers a sustainable option. It's both ecologically and socially sustainable. You're sustaining an ecosystem, you're sustaining the livelihoods of people that live here in the United States in areas where there's a lot of hardship. And also, maybe most importantly, this provides an opportunity for transparency where it's been difficult to find that transparency before. You can really literally trace, the plant back to the seed in the ground and the farm where it grew, which is really important. So that's what we're working on at the ABFFC. And I guess I should talk a little bit about what we are. Oops. Got a little far ahead of myself there. So we're a program focused on this sort of new domestic sustainable supply chain of forest-grown herbs. Focused on kind of doing this because we recognize that it meets the needs of a lot of consumers, a developing population of consumers. The concerns have been around for a long time, but the concerns have become more and more pronounced over time. It was kind of born out of this sort of recognized need across the supply chain based on these consumers, and also a really interesting convergence of efforts that were already happening. With a lot of our project partners. We're a really pretty broad partnership, and folks that are on the partnership have been working on this for really, many of them, years and decades, and it just came about that this was a time when everyone was at a point where what would help us push things forward was to work together and collaborate, and this provides the platform for that. It's really a network of folks across not only Appalachia, but beyond Appalachia, working on this same thing. And who are our partners? We started out with just 14 partner institutions, NGOs, governmental agencies, universities, private industry as well. We formed 2 years ago. As I said, the work has lasted much longer than 2 years. We're NIFA funded, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, under the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program, and that is that's kind of a big deal because we're really the first program of our kind to be funded like this, both in that we're not really traditional sort of we're traditional agriculture, but we're not really like mainstream agriculture. We're not growing, food crops right now. We're also, that program also focuses a lot on livestock and things. We're growing under a forest canopy, so we're the first project to be solely focusing on forest farming and also focusing on a specialty crop, which would be forest understory medicinal plants. We also have an advisory board that's composed in a way that gives representation to people that are at many different levels of the supply chain. Some of them are in this room. Ed mentioned that he's on the advisory board. Michael McGuffin's also on the advisory board, and Bill Chaffee, who's in the room from Gaia Herbs, is also on the advisory board. We also have forest farmers represented on our advisory board, beginning forest farmers, seasoned forest farmers, and we have service providers, people like extension agents and agency personnel that are the ones that are on the ground working with farmers all the time. And this kind of diversity is really what we think helps us to steer the project in a way that considers the interests of everybody that could be involved in the coalition or is involved in the coalition or in forest farming in general. Oops. So I'll just talk a little bit about what we do on this project. We do a lot of things, but mainly it's focused on forest farmers. We provide a lot of training opportunities, both face-to-face training and via our website. We had 5 multi-day conferences last year in different locations across Appalachia where forest farmers or people who wanted to be forest farmers would come and have an intensive experience learning how to cultivate, learning how to market, learning everything that we think they would need to know to kind of get themselves started. We also had a couple of stakeholder meetings where people from across the sort of the supply chain and across the industry would get together and have an opportunity to network with one another and collaborate with one another and share dialogue. We have more of those in the pipeline for the next 8 months. We have 3 new events on the calendar that are these multi-day trainings. We also have done so many one-day events. We've done partners that are sort of with outside organizations doing conference tracks and pre-conference tracks and sessions at other conferences and things like that. So we've really been trying to spread the word in a lot of different ways. We also have a website that we developed in our first year. And this website houses a lot of resources. We have over 200 video resources that are training videos, but they're also videos that are forest farmer features. They tell the stories of the forest farmers. And, we have extension publications on there as well. We publish a biannual forest farming footnotes newsletter that kind of tells about what our events are that are happening right now, and events that are up and coming, and those are all housed on the website as well. So we feel like we try to hit it at a lot of different points to try to make sure we're capturing as large an audience as we can. We also have a Facebook page that is for our members only, and we have several hundred people on that Facebook page now, and they're all really active, and that gives people an opportunity to connect with one another and not just us. So those are the types of things that we're doing, aside from just, this sort of thing, coming and speaking and talking about what we do. But we also have the farmers. Those are the biggest focus, and I wanted to just introduce a couple of them to you here. This is Larry. Larry has a farm in Maryland, and Larry has been farming for generations, forest farming medicinal plants for generations. So on his farm, he grows several different types of crops: ginseng, golden seal. He's getting into black cohosh now as well, and he uses a lot of different methods as well. You'll see he's got some of these that are like, they're rows. It kind of looks and somehow a little bit more conventional, in that it's a lot of crops close together. That would be one way to do it. And he's also got some that looks a little bit more wild. We have Randy. Randy's in Pennsylvania. He's been farming using the wild simulated method for 30 years, or over 30 years now. I think it's been probably around 35. And he uses just the wild simulated method. You'll see it looks, he's probably got a little bit of bushwhacking that he has to do to get to his crop there. But interestingly, these, and maybe some of you know, the plants differ, depending upon how you choose to grow them. So he grows, and he has been historically growing mainly to an export, sort of consumer, and there's a certain type of root that they're looking for, so that's what he does. And the main inputs he puts in are at the very beginning, where he's kind of clearing the land, controlling for invasives, that sort of thing, and selective timbering to make sure there's enough sunlight. That's all he does, and then he just tends it and lets it grow. And then we have Denny. Denny is also in Pennsylvania. Denny practices woods-grown farming, and this is one that you can use when you have land that maybe isn't quite as conducive to growing these plants. Maybe they do occur there naturally, but not in large abundance. And it allows you to use some fertilizers. It allows you to control for pathogens to some extent and that sort of thing. We also, and my favorite part is our population that are beginning forest farmers. And we have some really cool people that are just starting out right now. This is Stesha and Jeremy. They just bought some land in North Carolina. They have in their family just a history of a green thumb. They've been loving this sort of stuff for a long time, and they just finally got to get down and get serious about it. They've been planting, diversifying crops a lot, and just planting every season except winter pretty much over the last couple of years, growing medicinals, growing forest food crops. And they're also spending a lot of time in their community trying to build their community of forest farmers in their area, and providing resources for them as well. And as a coalition, we've been following them. We've been following, Larry, and we've been following all these other folks to just tell their story. So every year we go out to their land, and we see what they've got going on. And we've got some of those videos on our forest farming YouTube page if anybody's interested in looking at them. So we've been really busy over the last 2 years, and really we've only opened to membership within the coalition for the last year and a half, and at a year and a half we have 1,200 members, a little bit over 1,200 members, and that's a lot. We think that's really a lot, within that region, and we're so excited about it. What it showed to us is that there was really a need for this in our area. And those members, they're people across the industry, but mainly they're forest farmers or people who want to be forest farmers, and that's cool. We also have our project partners, our 14, original project partners doing really cool things as well, and trying to help expand services not only for farmers, but trying to connect across the industry to make this something that's really viable and works on the long-term scale. So project partners have been in collaboration. Let's see, this project right here, we had 5 years of working. One of our project partners, Eric Burkhardt out of Penn State, and actually I worked on it a little bit during my master's degree as well, was working with Pennsylvania Certified Organic to come up with this label. It's called Verified Forest Grown. And it rolled out 2 years ago when we launched the coalition. And the first farmers verified in Pennsylvania in 2015 and began selling their crops to companies under this label. Mountain Rose Herbs is one such company out of Eugene, Oregon. They felt like this program really aligned with their values and ethics as a company and also for their customers. They picked up the idea, they really rolled with it, and they've adopted it in a way that I think is really intuitive. Rather than kind of replacing anything with it, they've offered it as sort of a separate tiered product line that's allowing for customers to choose if they would like to source this type of product. And it's worked really well for them. They started with ginseng and they decided to expand out of that into black cohosh the next year in 2016. These are a couple more of our farmers, Cynthia and Michelle, coalition members out of Southwest Virginia. They both have herb farms, and they sold to Mountain Rose Herbs last year. And they did that and sort of collectively, they were working together to do it. And then the year after that, we have Anne here, and she was harvesting black cohosh leaf, which is sort of a new product, and that's very cool. And out of that, one of our other really intrinsic project partners, Appalachian Sustainable Development, just opened the Appalachian Harvest Herb Hub in Duffield, Virginia. And that's working with growers like Cynthia and Michelle in the Southwest Virginia area, providing them with a facility and equipment for post-harvest processing and a place where they can really collaborate, pull together resources and cooperate and have enough product to be able to sell to larger companies. So that's been really helpful for them. Their first harvest was actually in September. It was this month. And it was really successful. They sold to Mountain Rose Herbs, and they have several others in the pipeline right now for selling under the Forest Grown Verified label, also organic certified, and under the Blue Ridge Naturally label, which is more regional to southern Appalachia. So got some things in the works there. And some of our other project partners are doing the same thing. I didn't put United Plant Savers up here, but I should have. Rural Action United Plant Savers just won another national level grant, Conservation and Innovation grant, to also bring these same sorts of resources to their areas of West Virginia and Ohio. So lots of really cool things happening, and it seems like it's really the perfect time for this sort of thing to be happening, because more and more we're seeing this evidence of a shift in consumer awareness and sort of a more and more demand for this transparency and high ethical standards for what we're doing. And forest farming is just sort of one of these opportunities that's come about in response to this shift in consumer concern. So our next steps are really to continue to grow this network and to continue to grow capacity over time, in hopes that we're going to be able to supply, people who are interested, products companies who are interested in having, this more sustainably produced, both ethically, like when we're talking about social sustainability and ecological sustainability, have this sort of, direct supply line directly out of Appalachia. Thanks for your time. My email's up here, and so is the forest farming YouTube channel. If you're interested in going to check that out, we've got over 200 videos, and AppalachianBeginningForestFarmers.org is up there if you'd like to check out the website.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you very much. So now we're going to go from the field. We went from the field to the forest. So where the herbs come from, now we're going to step into a couple of the companies who buy these herbs. And both of these companies support these efforts, I know. And I want to encourage you others who have the opportunity, any of these cooperatives, and that's what I consider both of you. I know it's labeled as a coalition, but these cooperatives, just to support these folks, because it's a really good start. So first of all, they're going to tag team this, Sarah and Brenda from Nature's Way. They both work at Nature's Way. Sarah is the QA raw material supervisor at Nature's Way. And I was a little bit jealous in her photo in here under her bio. She's the only one that has a picture with her plant out in the field. So she did a good job, which makes sense because she was raised on a berry farm in northeastern Wisconsin and comes from that. So as a matter of fact, we had her out in the field not too long ago, and she felt very much at home. So anyway, she does a lot of different things there, but the main thing she does is does the primary oversight for the sourcing, supplier qualification, and ingredient testing at Nature's Way, and also oversees their authentication program. And then Brenda, who will come up after that. Brenda is the Director of Regulatory Affairs at Nature's Way, which is should be highlighted. That's a big task, I know, Brenda. She's been doing this for over 30 years with different companies, so she's got a lot of good experience, including she worked at Heinz Company. In her current role, she ensures that all of Nature's Way's operations are compliant with the new dietary regulations, including FSMA, right? And also, it's good that it's listed in here as a proactive regulatory strategies as well as resolving any issues that come up. So I'm sure you're not busy. But anyway, Brenda's going first. Okay, Brenda, come on up, please.
Thank you. We're glad to be talking to you about our ginkgo plantation. Sarah and I are presenting this on behalf of our Schwabe, Germany, and our Garnet ginkgo plantation colleagues who couldn't be here today, so we're kind of pinch hitting for them. So Nature's Way is actually part of Schwabe Group, which is one of the oldest herbal medicinal companies in the world, and they're located in Karlsruhe, Germany. And their expertise is botanical extractions, such as valerian, lavender, lemon balm, and of course ginkgo biloba. And we're actually vertically integrated. We cultivate our own St. John's wort as well as lavender, and of course ginkgo, which we're going to talk about. So our ginkgo biloba extract was developed in the 1960s, and it's called EGB 761, which stands for extracted ginkgo biloba. And this is the single biggest product in the whole Schwabe Group portfolio worldwide. It's sold in over 80 countries as a registered medicine under different brand names, such as the Tabanin, which you see here. But it's also sold here in the United States under the Nature's Way brand as our Ginkgold product. We have a Ginkgold Max, a Ginkgold, and a Ginkgold Eye. So those support cognitive function as well as eye health. So it was interesting. So as they developed the business of the ginkgo biloba extract, the supply chain originated in Korea. And probably in the 1970s, early 70s, the economic boom of South Korea caused a tightening in the ginkgo biloba leaf supply chain because nobody wanted to pick ginkgo leaves anymore. They wanted to, have better paying jobs. So of course, Schwabe was very concerned about this, and they knew they would have to do something to streamline and control the supply chain. So what they did is they started running trials over about 4 years, different places in the world, cultivating ginkgo to see where it grew best. And some of those sites that they looked at were in Maryland, here in the United States, South Carolina, and as well as Bordeaux, France. So what they were looking for is what was the best yield as far as growth and obviously key components in the ginkgo leaf extract. In probably the mid-1970s, they selected the South Carolina site, which is in Sumter, South Carolina, and they purchased about 1,600 acres, and it used to be an old cotton plantation. They also selected the Bordeaux, France site as well, so we actually have 2 ginkgo plantations, one in the United States and one in Europe. And the first actual harvest was in 1982 at the South Carolina plantation. And if you noticed, those look like bushes, which Sarah will talk about. That's actually very conducive into and needed for harvest because it's not the big Asian beautiful trees you see in an Asian garden. These are actually bushes, and she'll explain why that's needed.
All right, as Brenda mentioned before, when they selected this site, it was a cotton plantation, and so there were no ginkgo trees there. So when they made that investment in the 1,600 acres, they knew it was going to take them some time and some trial and error to figure out how to successfully cultivate ginkgo trees and produce high-quality ginkgo leaves. There was no book per se. I would say Schwabe pretty much wrote the book on successfully cultivating ginkgo after learning more about this plantation. So essentially, the decision to cultivate ginkgo trees was a minimum of a 5-year commitment. U.S.A has over 10 million trees at the Garnet plantation, about 10,000 trees per acre, and the sister facility in France has equally as many. So they have over 20 million trees producing the ginkgo leaves that they use to produce the EGB 761 extract. But the trees they don't start off that size. They start them off in a nursery for the first 2 years. After 2 years, they'll transplant them into the fields, into the rows you see sort of in this. Oh, I should transition the slide there. You can see in the field here. And then they have to wait another 3 years before that tree starts producing leaves of high enough quality for extraction, for making that standardized extract. So it really is a commitment by the organization. Just to throw some numbers up there, they produce 700 tons of dry ginkgo leaves each year. They employ 12 full-time staff, 8 seasonal staff, and 12 temporary staff during the harvest season. So in 2017, they actually continued to invest in the plantation. They purchased an additional 200 acres nearby in Sumter. But the $2.2 million does also include the cost to add irrigation and roadways for access to those farms. So they continue to invest in it. And the farm operates with a $3 million budget every year. So here's just some additional photos of the fields, just for your visibility. So again, I mentioned before that the farm didn't, there was no book on cultivating ginkgo. So the entire production system was actually developed by the staff at Garnet together with U.S.A over the last 30 years. So they continue to tell us that it is a system of trial and error. Do they think they perfected it? Absolutely not. We all continue to learn. But the oldest tree at the plantation is actually 37 years old, and so they're still trying to figure out how old those trees will actually get before they stop producing high-quality ginkgo leaves. The trees are cut back after approximately 5 years because actually the leaf quality decreases as the trees get older. So they do cut them back, and which I will talk about in some future slides. So you get to see how that works. And also, John Deere and Case IH aren't out there marketing ginkgo leaf harvesters, okay? I mean, they're working for production agriculture, corn, cotton, soybeans. So over the last 30 years, the gentleman in the lower right photo, that's Frank. Frank is the lead mechanic, and I will say probably self-made engineer. On the left-hand side there, you see a second-hand cotton harvester that the plantation actually modified. The middle photo shows some modification to the head of the equipment. They've had to cut frames and adjust frames, refabricate heads. And again, this has been a trial and error over the last 30 plus years to figure out how best to harvest the leaves without damaging the trees. So with that, we'll launch into some of the other equipment, right? Almost all of this has been custom modified by the farm. In the upper left corner, you can see some of the equipment used to cut the trees back after they're 5 years old. I will say that's what I call a combination of a sawmill and a wood chipper having a baby. So that's kind of what that is in the upper left corner. And all the other equipment shows the flaming equipment for weed control, which we'll talk about next. So one of the most important things to keep in mind at Garnet is they use absolutely no agrochemicals, no herbicides, no pesticides, no fungicides. The farm utilizes 3 methods of weed control: mechanical, thermal, and they do use some manual. But really the decision was made by the U.S.A group and the Garnet plantation. I mean, that has been a problem in ginkgo, these pesticide residues, and so not using these agrochemicals in the product completely eliminates the risk that your extract will contain these residues. So when we talk mechanical means, the lower left photo here shows a cultivator that was developed or fabricated by the plantation to get rid of the weeds between the rows of trees. So you can see it has to be tall enough to accommodate the height of the tree. But then also to get rid of the weeds in between the trees, they've actually developed a flamer. So throughout the harvest season, you'll see in the lower right photo that there's this piece of equipment travels down the row and actually flames the weeds. This is done several times throughout the harvest, or the growing season, I should say, to eradicate weeds. And then they also use some manual weed control. So they'll go out and actually pick the weeds. So here's just some photos. The plantation manager is in the upper left corner. There's some folks manually removing weeds in the lower left, and I know you can't see it, but the picture on the right-hand side is actually the flaming equipment traveling down the row. And you know, this is a risk with using thermal weed control. You will damage some of these leaves, you will damage some of these trees, especially as the trees are larger. But it greatly outweighs the risk that you're going to have noxious weeds incorporated into your extract when you go to make that product. When they talk harvest, so capacity, Garnet processes 100 tons of fresh leaves every 24 hours. The harvest season is like late July through the end of August, so every 24 hours they're turning out 100 tons of fresh leaves, and they're really limited here by the drying capacity. That's the rate limiting factor at the plantation. And again, the harvesting technology has been developed on site. Up until a couple of years ago, they only had a 2-row harvester. Now they have 4. So Frank's been busy. And then the lower right-hand corner here, you can see pictures of the trees after the leaves have been removed. Once the leaves are harvested, they immediately go into drying. So there is a drying facility at Garnet. Again, they process about 25 tons of dry leaves every 24 hours during the harvest. So they travel through the dryer. It takes about 10 minutes to travel through that dryer. The leaves never exceed 80 degrees Celsius, and they are baled and wrapped and almost immediately shipped to U.S.A. for extraction in Germany. So here's just another photo of the dryer. Quality control, you know, you guys spoke of this as well, but this whole production process is under the control and direction of U.S.A., so it's fully under our control. Again, no application of herbicides and pesticides. We have full traceability onto every batch, every field, and we have complete documentation for all production steps. So it's a highly documented process, very traceable, and they're able to control the moisture in that product. If every second bale is actually checked for moisture, and if they don't meet spec, they go back through the dryer. So they're able to really, really control that. Here's just a photo of some of the bales awaiting shipment. And then here's a photo of the after harvest cut down, so the trees are getting cut back. Just a couple photos there. So this equipment, basically the wood chips, the trees are chipped, and basically it's used as organic matter back on the fields. But overall, you know, having this level of control really allows the U.S.A. group and Garnet to produce one of, if not the most high quality ginkgo biloba extract on the market, and then us as a manufacturer and marketer of a dietary supplement to really deliver a high quality product to our customer. So. That's it.
So thank you, Brenda and Sarah. So that's an instance of a larger company reaching back into the field and producing your own product. So very interesting. Good, thank you. And it's in South Carolina. Yay. So anyway, next we have Bethany Davis. Bethany is the Director of Industry Regulatory Affairs for Mega Foods. And if you read her bio, she's a member of everything. She's on the APA board with myself. She's on the Coalition for Supplement Sustainability and also chairs the OTA Association's Dietary Supplement Council. Every time I show up at an event, Bethany's there, and she's a little bit verbal. She likes to speak up and share, which really gives us all good guidance and everything. So she's going to talk to us mainly about your Farm Fresh program in a little bit.
Yeah.
So thank you, Bethany.
Hi, guys. Thank you to APA for having me, and thanks to all you guys for showing up on a Friday for a full day after a week in Las Vegas. And I think that, oh, thanks. Oh, oops, nope.
Uh-oh.
Mm-mm.
Uh-oh, sorry.
We're going to go like this.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. So I think I'm being asked to chat about, how come it's not up on the screen?
Good question.
Okay, I'm gonna let you do that. I'm gonna warm up the crowd. Okay.
Warm up the crowd.
So I think I've been asked to speak to you today about our Farm Fresh program broadly, and that's kind of all under this broader tent to me of transparency, which is another topic that our company gets asked to speak about a lot. And what I think is super awesome is that Haley's doing a great job right now of actually live streaming this chat and this education for Facebook. And I don't want them to feel left out, so I'm going to ask you guys to stick with me just for a minute while I go say hi to everybody.
So because she's not in PowerPoint, she just pulled up the PDF, so I'm not sure how to get it on the screen.
So hi Robert, hi Carly, hi PK. I know they're all watching. So they're all back at the home office in New Hampshire, where I work. I work for a brand called Megafood. And this is, if it's okay with you guys to just take a moment to embrace what I'm going to offer here. This is the audience participation part of this panel. And if you're feeling like I'm feeling right now, to be totally transparent, I might not have gotten the exact ideal amount of hours of sleep this week that maybe would have been preferred for an optimal performance today. So I thought it'd be good to get our blood flowing a little bit. So I thought we could all take a really deep breath all together and let it out and kind of just oxygenate. We'll do one more if it's okay. Cool. That also helps if you get nervous with public speaking. And then I want to ask a couple questions so we can get the arms moving here. So my friend Lance on Facebook today told a funny joke that it made me giggle. So I'll ask, who wants to hear a joke about potassium? Okay. No, I know you guys are herb people, but that's a vitamin joke, but that is the whole joke. Okay, and then, so I have another question, slightly more serious. Who here participated, came early, got here at 7:30 on the last day of supply side and had breakfast from APA with the APA group? Anyone get breakfast today? So who knows who made any of the things, who made or grew any of the things that you ate today? Show of hands. Okay, so who here takes herbal products and dietary supplements? Show of hands. Who here knows, maybe if your own brand, maybe that's cheating a little bit. So the brand, if you take other people's brands, who knows any of the people who grew the foods and herbs that are in the products that you take? You guys are kind of just, okay, a smaller amount, right? So this is a real thing. I just went on a road trip. Okay. With my buddy Rick Polito and with New Hope, and we went from Omaha, Nebraska to Expo East, which I don't know how many of you guys attend, but the whole idea is to kind of connect really closely with farmers. So Megafood sponsored this road trip. We started the Friday before the show, and we visited about 15 or 20 farmers on the way and talked to them about farm policy. And I'm someone who, I like to think of myself as a conscious consumer and someone who cares a lot about the food I'm buying and especially what I'm serving to my 2 little boys at home. And I like to kind of pat myself on the back a lot for all my highly ethical and thought out food and supplement choices. And what I realized on that road trip was, how much I had to learn and what it's really like growing and trying to sell local products, herbal products, food products, what have you. So I learned a ton on that. Check that out on New Hope if you're interested. It was a really compelling trip, and we learned a lot. And what it did is it shrunk down a lot of the supply chain for me, actually meeting the people who grow and supply to some of the brands that I know and love. And so that's kind of what my talk's going to be about, which I'm actually going to get to and start now. So you may have noticed in the last couple of years, we've got more interest from consumers in shopping local. There was a FMI U.S. grocery trend report study that came out this year, just like a month ago, and it provided some data points around how much interest there is in people shopping local. So this graphic on the left says that how often do shoppers purchase locally grown products? Occasionally was 80%, always was 14%, and never was only 6%. So there's all kinds of sets of values and things that people look for, like we were learning about on the earlier panel. Third-party certifications, various reasons to believe, but local is definitely one of them. And when people were asked why do they purchase local, freshness in season, supporting the local economy, taste, and another one, 40% said that they like to know the product where it's grown. And if you think, I ate a lot of really great food this week in Las Vegas, and I don't know where any of it came from. And every time I travel, that's something I think about. So I think shrinking that supply chain has become a really interesting proposition for people, and we know that mega food consumers really like to shrink down that supply chain. So I'm going to tell you the story of how we came to discover this. So is anyone familiar with mega food, the brand mega food? All right, cool, great. So we're a brand that makes whole food-based dietary supplements. And P.S., I didn't know until today, when I was hearing William speak, that I owe him a giant bear hug, because I did not know that he was involved when Pharmavite purchased Megafood, Food State. But I owe him a big bear hug, because that's been a really enjoyable and positive experience for us. We feel really supported by that brand, and so I have to leave for the airport right after this, but maybe William can find me on the side and I can just offer up a quick bear hug as thank you for that. But what we do is we buy food from farmers, typically in the U.S., and we put them in our products. We make all of our products on-site in New Hampshire, and we sell them at retail. So it helps that we have really shrunk that supply chain down, and we've been buying food ingredients, whole food ingredients, for decades. What's really interesting is that for some reason we weren't very good at talking about that until a few years ago. And what we realized was we were talking about, hey, we make our vitamin C with oranges, whole oranges, peel and all, and it comes from a great farm in Florida, and we had never really had the aha moment to say, well, let's actually introduce people to the person that we're buying it from. And so we did a test. We took our vitamin C products, Complex C being one of them, and we put Uncle Matt's right on the front there. You can see the little sign saying, actually, this is where we get the food from. On the back of the label, you'll see a little story about Uncle Matt. And so this was, we didn't actually change our formula. We didn't even change what we were doing. All we did was put together some cool video and information about the actual farmer that we're buying from, who, to us, we look at him as family, really, and a leader in organic. And we started talking about them and introducing the farmers to our customers. And I don't know if you know about vitamin C. A lot of people buy it, and it has pretty steady sales. In the fall, sometimes it goes up. But this is showing the whole vitamin C subcategory and mega food. And you can see that inflection point where we started actually marketing where the oranges were coming from that we use in the manufacture of vitamin C products, and we experienced a really pleasant bump in sales. And so this was our aha moment. This was about 5 years ago. And we said, okay, let's start doing this. Let's start going around and talking to the farmers that we work with and telling people more about them. So now this has grown into what we call our Farm Fresh program, our Farm Fresh Partner program, and we have lots of partners all over the U.S. And we put them on our website, we put them on the bottle, we do press releases when we launch new products that include Farm Fresh partnerships. You can go online and you can actually view video of the farm, see my CEO interviewing and chatting with some of our farm partners, and learn more about the ways in which we work together outside of just the transactional purchase of their ingredients. We really consider them part of the family, and we throw them a party every Expo West, and we fly everybody out and get everybody together and talk about this community that we have and how important the Farm Fresh program is. This is kind of a snapshot of our Farm Fresh partners currently. Some of these people you may know. And this is some sort of examples of how we talk to people, how we communicate and message the partnership. And then online, you can watch videos. And to be really real and transparent and a little bit vulnerable, I was doing what I want to do and chatting with Thatcher for the whole break before this panel rather than making sure that I could get this video to work. But I'm still I'm gonna try. So let's see what happens here. But this is an example of the types. Haley, you can zoom in. This is an example. Oh, wait, this is Happy Thanksgiving. That's not what we're going for. Hold on. This is an example of a video that we'll put together and share about our Farm Fresh partners. And hopefully this works. Okay. What's that? I don't know. I thought it was going to work. Oh. So I'm using my personal hotspot. And I don't know if this is going to work, but... Okay. Okay, this is a fail, but basically I'll try to see if I can fast forward and see some of the cool shots. But we go and we bring our buddy AA. He's our full-time video guy. He's probably 50% of his time is dedicated to creating this type of content for consumers. But we go down, we take great drone footage of the farms, we talk to the farmers and their family members, and show them, hey, this is turmeric from Kauai Organic Farms in Hawaii. But we say, hey, these are the folks that we've chosen to partner with. These are their values. This is how they farm, why they believe in the type of farming they're doing, how their farm impacts their community, and how and why MegaFood wants to be a part of that. And so it's been a really rewarding program. I'm sorry that I can't show you the whole video. That's on me. And now I've broken my presentation, but hopefully you can still read this. So the goal of this program, it's quite scaled up now. It's really become one of the reasons to believe for our brand. We've heard from our consumers. They love this program. They love having that shortened supply chain. We take the whole foods and process them in-house, and we actually have live cams in our facilities. So what we're enabling is people to say, hey, this is who grew your food. This is what they're all about, what they care about, what they're into, why we are supportive of their methods of agriculture. And then they see the actual foods come into our facility, get gently ground up, dried via a refractance window dryer, and then they can literally watch it go into a bottle. And then they can go get that at their favorite natural products retailer. And shrinking that supply chain down like that, we have found to resonate extremely strongly with our consumer base. So this year we will buy, by the end of this quarter, we will have purchased over 750,000 pounds of fresh whole foods that are delivered to our back door up in New Hampshire every year. And what does this Farm Fresh partnership look like, aside from this kind of marketing value and the fact that we're supporting organic and sustainable farms by having this reliable, pretty well forecasted purchase coming their way annually? We also give a portion of our co-branded product annual sales back to the farmers. And currently, the way that most of them use it's meant to be a local contribution to that local farming economy. So many of them pick a local nonprofit to defer those funds to. But we have a lot of plans to ramp up the Farm Fresh partnership in the future and get these connections working even deeper and see how, on a deeper level, we can collaborate. How can MegaFood help our Farm Fresh partners find solutions, for sustainability issues? How can we help them improve their soil? How can we help them invest in no-till or low-till technologies? You might have seen today that we just put out a press release just today that we have just hired a new Vice President of Social Impact, Sarah Newmark, who's kind of famous in our sector for her sustainability and soil efforts. So we're really excited to figure out how are we going to scale this program up and make it even more meaningful in the future. Here's a picture of Marty from the Florida Organic Growers Association, Robert Craven, my CEO, and Uncle Matt from Uncle Matt's Organic Farm. And, how many opportunities do you really have in life to get those silly, gigantic checks? So that's what we do at least once a year. So our current Farm Fresh program is integral to our annual plan every year. It's a part of our roadmap. at least one new Farm Fresh partner per year. All new product launches are tied to a Farm Fresh partner. We started by looking at who are we already buying from and basically just, marketing those folks and introducing our consumers to those folks. But now, more and more people are interested in becoming Farm Fresh partners. And as we meet interesting folks, and I want to talk to some of the people on this panel, but as we meet really interesting folks with compelling stories who have really fascinating farms and we feel our values align with them, now we're even, developing products potentially around interesting ingredients and interesting Farm Fresh partners as we discover them. The vast majority of the whole foods and the agricultural ingredients that we buy are now attached to a Farm Fresh partner, about 80% of them, by wet weight annually. And we have a full process and a team dedicated to this. And it's not that quick of a process, really. There's a lot of thought that needs to go into executing this. A lot of times the farmers that we're working with have never sold into the dietary supplement supply chain before, and it's a little different, and there's a few more rules. And so a lot of times it's a bit of a process where we work together and sometimes have to provide some guidance and training. So these are kind of our ideal Farm Fresh partner characteristics. Right now, it's a must-have. I know this is a local panel and a Grow in the U.S.A. panel. It's absolute must-have that you currently at this time are in the U.S. or in Canada, all in the name of that shrinking supply chain and really trying to stimulate the farming and agricultural economy in the U.S. largely. We want to make sure that the values of the farmer sort of align with our mega food brand story and culture. We've had R&D audits where, it was like a family and they were like fighting each other during the audit and almost like coming to blows. That would be something we would consider maybe a red flag. We're a non-GMO company, and so we're very cautious of that and cautious of cross-contamination. That wouldn't, if someone was farming genetically engineered crops as well, that wouldn't necessarily align with our mega food brand at this period of time. A big one is we want to make sure that they can actually meet the operational needs, so that they have traceability, they have quality, they're able to work with us on accurate forecasts and SIDI, basically documentation issues. A lot of farmers, especially smaller scale farmers, if you don't have someone that actually works in the office, kind of butts in chairs instead of always on the field, we need someone that's at least part-time sort of available to connect if connection needs to happen during the business hours. And really, one of the most powerful things we can do is pay an affordable parity price for these products. We're a premium brand, and this is a really important part of our brand, and we believe in paying people a fair price for the products that they're giving us. But we want to make sure that the pricing works. So what can Mega Food afford to pay for these products? What's going to work for us? And we want to make sure that that's working for the farmer. So that's a must-have as well. The nice-to-haves are, some help on the licensing agreement and really even ability to cross-promote. So we've been able to work with some of our strategic retail chains that we're members of. So, for instance, Whole Foods Market. We've been able to say, if you're going to go buy your Uncle Matt's vitamin C, boosted with mega food turmeric in the dairy aisle, hey, do you want a coupon to go get your vitamin C tablets in the supplement aisle? And that's really beneficial for retailers. The margins are a lot smaller outside of the supplement aisle, and if we can help them drive traffic to that supplement aisle, that's really good for them. They appreciate those. So any opportunities for cross-promotion with the Farm Fresh partners that we partner with is always a plus. We love family-owned farms. Currently, all of our farms that we work with are family-owned. We think of them as our family, and how we talk about our company and our employees as part of our culture at Food State. We talk about them like we are a family, and we have, when we have town hall meetings, that's how we talk about each other, and that's really how we see each other, and the farmers are an extension of that, and we love family-owned farms. And then right now we want to see that they're either a certified organic or certified sustainable grower, or have a really impactful, compelling story for the rationale behind how they're farming and why. And that's what we like to share with the consumers. So some of the challenges, the biggest one is inexperience with documentation or testing. And it's not a deal breaker by any means, but it's one of the things that we find ourselves having to work a lot with farmers. Ability to meet our specifications. We heard earlier this morning about brands that have like 17 certifications, and we're one of those brands, but we've had to fail material for not necessarily being out of specification from an identity perspective, but if there was cross-contamination with gluten products, and we won't be able to certify our products gluten-free. If there's herbicide or pesticide contamination, we test every lot of product that we produce for over 200 or over 150, I think, different herbicides and pesticides, and it's an important brand promise that we're making to our consumers. So if there's heavy contamination with herbicide and pesticide residues, that can be a real challenge and potentially a deal breaker. Micro issues, for people that aren't used to selling into the supplement chain, that's something we have to test for and make sure that we don't have any micro issues in testing. That might not be the same case for people that are selling into co-ops and selling to grocery stores or to restaurants, so that piece of it can be a bit of a learning curve. And heavy metals, especially when we're looking at herbal products, there tend to be more concentrated heavy metal tolerances, and we're currently in compliance with Prop 65, and at this point we refuse to put something on our bottle that says our Baby and Me Too product is going to cause birth defects. So we are at this time committed to making sure that our products never inch up above the tolerance limits for Prop 65 for heavy metals. So that can also be something that needs to be worked through. And like I said, we need some staff that's available to handle regular communications. If it's a really, really small farm, sometimes that could be a challenge. Current deal breakers, size. We want to find a partner that's the right size that can grow with us. And also, we're really cautious at this point in time in being a majority or the sole purchaser of somebody's ingredients. We want to make sure that there's, some risk mitigation. And what we would hate to do is discontinue a line of products and not be able to, keep a family farmer having the business that they thought was coming their way. So we're really careful to make sure that we're a reasonable and really even preferred a small portion of the customer base of where these farmers' products are going. I mentioned some cultural differences. There's certainly some practice differences. So on R&D audits, if we're talking to maybe a wild harvester and they lay their crops out on the ground to dry in the sun after they come back from harvesting, and that's 4 or 5 feet from the line of porta potties that the staff uses, that's a red flag. Sometimes we have to look at what are the practices of the farm. And documentation, like I said, is always a biggie, but that's one of the ones that we're getting really good at working with folks on. So in our big vision for the future, does it make our VP of operations nervous that we have single suppliers for the majority of products and that we make single suppliers, and they're not even just a single supplier, they're on the label. So especially in this period of time where we have entire countries like Puerto Rico getting their agricultural capacity completely wiped out overnight, can that be stressful and quite a thing to manage, I guess, for a company? Yeah, you bet. So we're wondering, how do we make this bigger? How do we open up the amount of farmers and the different size of farmers that we can work with and get all of our agricultural elements identified with Farm Fresh partners, or at least a Farm Fresh program that partners can sort of, maybe would be more like a co-op model. Looking forward to working with Sarah Newmark on that future vision. We would love to be able to have farms of all sizes and capabilities given the tools and the resources that they need to scale up. We're having conversations, just thinking out loud and sort of creating a vision around how do we do more to benefit the soil and the local economies from the farmers from whom we buy products. And, what's the plan? What's the plan for international? Can we make a Schizandra product from Schizandra, certified organic Schizandra berries in China and actually sell that in China? How do we scale local globally? That's an interesting question that we're talking a lot about too. So this is my email. If you are interested in this program or learning more, shoot me an email. Like I said, unfortunately, I have to leave right after this presentation. But shoot me an email if you have any questions.
Thank you, Bethany. So Tony, there we go. He's taking the long way around. Should have known. So those of you who don't know Tony, he's actually the general counsel for APA. He's been doing this for over 40 years in the food and drug business. We're going to try to stick up some of his slides real quick. He's going to give us our closing arguments of why we should grow in the USA, right? Come on up. Here, start talking. I'll find him.
Well, I can't talk without my slides. Where's your little thing? Where is it?
It's right there.
Okay. Momentito.
Okay, you get it up.
I'll try to.
Okay. I'll tell you what, can you give me a wireless mic? Can you turn on the wireless mic? This one. While Tony's bringing that up, maybe we have some questions, because we're getting close on time. So we took away the mics in the room. If anybody has a question, please raise your hand. I'll be glad to give you the mic until Tony gets his slides up. Come on, somebody. Come on up. I knew Beth. Thank you, Beth.
So for our friends at Sackwoods Herb Farm, how do you deal with crop failures if somebody is contracted for a specific amounts, if you don't mix lots among farms? And are you dealing with the issue of milling or size reduction? And how do you deal with sharing equipment there?
So the first answer to your question about crop failures is it's all about communication. So we're very upfront with our buyers in the beginning that things happen that are out of our control. Of course, the forces of nature play into what we do a great deal. So as soon as we see any potential deficit in our contracted amounts, we reach out to the buyers and we discuss it. And in some cases, it's the communication involves, I'm sorry, we're not going to come through with any of this. In other cases, it's, our projections may be a little low. Are you going to be able to source a little bit more than what you need from another source? Because this is where we're at. So communication is really important. And we again, redundancy in the co-op model, we're all growing overages because we have the ability to market the surpluses that we're growing. So we feel like we're really insuring ourselves against deficits in our yields and our contracted amounts. So we're feeling good about that. And the second part of your question involving milling is yes, we are right now offering milling for different specs for different companies, and it's something that we're working up into providing a lot more different specifications. So our milling equipment right now is pretty simple. It's basically gasoline-powered hammer mills, but we're going to be working with some more refined equipment so we can offer more specific mills and even some powdered products. But a lot of the manufacturers that we're working with right now, fortunately, they're part of their attempts at achieving high quality are having less of a milling because obviously most of us in the room know that the more milling, the more surface area for the botanicals exposed to the elements and potential degradation. So does that answer your question, Beth? Great.
Yeah. So if you'll hold on to your other questions, I see Tony's ready. We'll give Tony a little patience since he just rushed over here.
I'm going to talk about made in the USA and country of origin. They're kind of two sides of the coin. Why grow in the USA? Auditing is easier. And the U.S. EPA pesticide laws and regulations make it a crime to apply unregistered pesticides. That's good news for manufacturers because APA's position on pesticide testing of U.S. grown crops is that it's not required. It's a crime and U.S. EPA enforces. We have the same position regarding NOP, organic certified commodities. So check the cost of pesticide testing for botanicals. That is what your U.S.A. customers will save by buying U.S.A. grown botanicals. Auditing is easier. It allows you to get close to your supplier. You can audit the entire process from field to packing for shipment, all of the handling. You can look at all of it. You can get in Ed's face. That's important. Made in the USA claims, this is, like everything here in the USA, regulated. What's the standard for a product to be called made in the USA without any qualification? The product must be all or virtually all made in the U.S., which includes the usual places, the 50 states, the District of Columbia, the U.S. territories, and possessions. All or virtually all means that all the significant parts and processing that go into the product must be of U.S. origin. That is, the product should contain no or negligible content. There are nuances to this for manufactured goods, but for our products, this is the basic premise for Made in the USA. Who enforces Made in the USA? The Federal Trade Commission enforces. There have been recent cases. Search for FTC and complying with the Made in the USA standard. You'll find the standard, and if you look through the FTC's website, you'll find the kinds of cases they've recently brought within the last decade, and you'll find that some very, very big companies have fallen on their sword. You will see detailed guidance. The other enforcement tool, and perhaps the more effective one because there are more frequent cases, and the more dangerous one from our perspective because it costs a lot more to defend a case in court against a plaintiff's lawyer than it does to settle a case with the FTC. They didn't bring the case against you because they thought there was a gray area. You're usually way over the line. Plaintiffs' lawyers enforce vigorously. They want to take your money from your treasury, put it into their pocket. Recent cases have caused many companies to delete the claims. Recent cases have been brought, usually in California, against major U.S. companies. Who makes Made in the U.S. claims? It's the usual suspects, companies that put the claim on because others do it without any idea of what the requirements are. I'm sure you don't see many companies like that in our marketplace. Of course you do. There are the companies that are also making disease companies, and they're known as the low-hanging fruit. And then there are the companies that research and carefully make these kinds of claims, make them lawfully, and they do so, and they've protected themselves from lawsuits by carefully taking care of business. Country of origin labeling. This is back to the future because we're kind of going through this now in the U.S. Buy American. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930, it was known as the Buy America Act at the time it was passed. It was passed during the Depression. It was passed because we wanted to give more jobs and more production to U.S. companies. It requires that unless accepted, every article of foreign origin imported to the U.S. shall be marked with the country of origin, unless there's been substantial transformation. It is the country of origin is always the last country where the product underwent a substantial formation, generally known as working or processing, which results in the creation of a new or different article of commerce, having a name, character, or use different from those of its components. When they're substantially transformed in the U.S., then the product is not considered a foreign product, and country of origin labeling is not required. Let me give you an example. In the fish oil industry, we know the fish come from usually offshore of the western South America. They're processed usually in Peru. And they may be processed and then sent to China for further processing, or sent to Canada for further processing. And marketers in that area will choose, usually getting some legal advice from people who are very skilled in this, they will choose whether they want to say product of Peru, whether they want to say product of Canada. We know what they probably don't want to say. For drugs, it's usually the place, it's almost always the place where the active pharmaceutical ingredient is manufactured. So if the API, as it's known, is manufactured in Norway, even though the drug is manufactured here in the United States, it's going to say product of Norway. This is a very dicey issue. You have to be careful with it. When the article is only suspected of a minor processing, it's not substantially transformed. It is considered to remain a foreign product and must be marked to show its foreign country of origin. There are thousands of decisions by Customs Border Patrol in this area. And there are lawyers who are specialized in doing this. So when you decide not to put country of origin labeling on that product that contains 10 ingredients that you got from India, Bangladesh, or China, you better be careful. Because in this industry, at least, among competitors, everyone knows where these things come from. So it's a risky business. We haven't seen lawsuits by plaintiffs' lawyers in this area, but in a forum that I was on yesterday, one of the lawyers said he expected to see more lawsuits in this area. And lawsuits in this area might take on more current cachet because we're in an administration environment that is focused more on Buy America and contrary to importation. Support our U.S. growers, Buy American, but we appreciate that the French and the Germans and that the Italians have given strong support to this Botanical Congress. Thank you.
So, thank you, Tony, and let's give a thanks to everyone on the panel. We got a very deep-rooted knowledge panel here. So I know you all smell the food in the room, but it's going to sit there, so we do have time for a few questions. We're going to start back here in the back with Stacy. Just raise your hand, please.
Hi, thank you, guys. I am just in awe of some of the work that you guys are doing, and to be, especially the forest farming, I think those things are great, and I am absolutely terrified that the new regulations under Part 112 and Part 117, and especially the lines that FDA has drawn around what is produce and what is a farm activity, I'm terrified that it's going to put all of y'all out of business. So I have a request and a question. Number one request is if you've analyzed these things in any detail and you have specific areas of concern, please let us know at APA, because we are submitting comments yet again on this topic and how much we object to what FDA has done. And then just as a question, if you have done that kind of analysis, can you summarize right now what do you think? Is this as big of a problem as I perceive it to be, or have you looked at it and you're fine with it all?
Just pick up a mic, any one of you. Go for it, Holly.
I'm wondering if you could just ask your question again, because we're all wondering if we could have a little bit more clarity.
So, for example, to ask a very specific question, just as an example, are you prepared as a forest farmer to control the quality of the water that you use to irrigate your fields?
So that's a really interesting question, right? Because our forest farmers don't water the fields. The rain waters the fields. And I think that's kind of the point of forest farming. There isn't a lot in the way of irrigation and that sort of thing. we have a problem in forest farming anyway in that often these forest medicinals aren't recognized as crops. So, you know, when we're talking about crop insurance and things like that, I mean, that's an area that still needs to be worked on, and it's something that, as a coalition, is a part of the conversation that we're having, you know, across our membership base, and then also trying to figure out the best ways to approach this with regulating bodies. So there's still a lot, I would say, to be worked out, but I mean, in terms of your question, I think that it's probably less relevant to forest farming than maybe some other things, just because, you know, ginseng doesn't really require a sprinkler per se, you know.
In North Carolina, or South Carolina, it might be different in different parts of the country.
It's very different.
Anyway,
yeah,
there's
right.
some very difficult issues, and I just would really like to get input from actual farmers.
I just would like to make one comment. Michael McGuffin and I are on a board together, and we spend a lot of time in the car a couple times a year, and I've been talking about this, and they don't know how to even regulate us in the state of Vermont. Are we a producer or a processor? They go back and forth, and depending on the year and whoever's who's inspecting us, they don't know where to put us. So we're concerned about this. We're trying to stay one step ahead. We are trying to inform the conversations in our state, but we would welcome more conversation around it because it's a lot.
Thank you. Other questions? I have a question for the panel, something that's come up recently, the issue of geo-authentic growing herbs, where they're within their native range. Can someone share your opinions on that, please? Go, Jeb.
I guess I'll give that a shot. I think there are definitely several species that are should be grown and sourced from the lands they're native to, both from from a constituent level standpoint as well as a social standpoint. We don't want to be growing maca outside of the land where people have been making a living for centuries and depending on this for food and making a living for centuries on this. However, there are some crops that are very adaptable, and we're growing, as I mentioned earlier, we're growing ashwagandha and we're growing tulsi in Vermont, and we're finding really high constituent levels. We're using season extension, of course. So I think it really is highly dependent on the species you're talking about. But there are definitely some that I think should be grown in their specific bioregions by the people who have been growing them traditionally. And then there are others, I think, that are adaptable, and it, again, depends highly species to species and also the quality. Does that answer your question, Ed?
Yes.
I'm sure there's a lot more to this discussion.
Sure.
I would like to add a little bit to that, too. I don't know. Okay, there we go. So I agree. I think that it's very specific to, well, species by species, but then there's also some, really cool conversation around and things happening with, for instance, growing Chinese herbs in Appalachia. I mean, if you think about sourcing and how difficult that's been sometimes for Chinese herbs, like the Appalachian Herb Growers Consortium, they're doing all Chinese herbs. And because of our ecosystem being so similar to some of the places that these are native to in China, they grow really well. But then we have to worry about things like invasives. It's obviously not invasive in China, but is it invasive here? So there's a lot of conversation I think still needs to be had about that.
Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you all. This was really a great panel. I appreciate all of the work that you each put into preparing to be here, and really appreciate just the focus on this domestic supply.